Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare
Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Pastyacha Desatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Bhagavatam, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Continuing, Canto 3, Chapter 1. How many were with us for the first 7, 8 verses that we covered the other morning? How many were not with us the other morning? Okay. So let's do a little review for those that were not with us, and since we're waiting for the Bhagavatam anyways. Before I reached here, there was a summary of Canto 2. And the last chapter of Canto 2 is Answers by Citing the Lord's Version. And the Answers by Citing the Lord's Version ends with Maharaj Parikshit asking a question, going back to first canto. In the first canto, there was a discussion by Sutta, who heard it from Shukadev, where the explanation was that Vidura was insulted, he went on pilgrimage, and in the course of pilgrimage, he met Maitreya, and then he came back to Hastinapur, and he liberated Dhritarashtra. So the question was, 2, what were the places that Vidura visited? And second was, they're so exalted, Maitreya and Vidura, the discussion must have been very wonderful. Can you share what that discussion was? Canto 2, Chapter 10 ends. Chapter 3, Canto 1 begins where Shukadev Goswami has heard the question, he wants to give the answer. And he begins giving the answer by describing the exchange between Maitreya and Vidura that was preceded by a few events. And those few events, in the chapter, there's the places that Vidura went. But Shukadev Goswami is going to answer this way. We're going to start with, you want to read along, 3.1.6. Now we discussed this already, but I'll just read it again. Sri Shukadev Goswami said, King Dhritarashtra became blind under the influence of impious desires to nourish his dishonest sons, and then he set fire to the lacquer house to burn the fatherless nephews of the Pandavas. Now, Mahabharata describes it a little differently. Mahabharata says Duryodhana received a plan from one of his relatives, his cousins, and said, let's burn them. And he liked the idea. Before just doing it, he consulted his father, who couldn't bear the idea. And Duryodhana said, I'll give up my life if I can't destroy those Pandavas. So his father looked the other way. He didn't object, knowing what their plan was. Here it was his plan, and he executed his plan. So it's a different version. That's quite okay. The king, this is what it's, the king, that's Dhritarashtra, text 7, did not forbid his son Dushashana's abominable action of grabbing the hair of Draupadi, the wife of the godly king Yudhisthira, even though her tears washed the red dust on her breast. Yudhisthira, who was born without enmity, without any enemy, was unfairly defeated in gambling. Because he had taken the vow of truthfulness, he went off to the forest. When he came back, in due course, he begged the return of his rightful share of the kingdom. He was refused by Dhritarashtra, who was overwhelmed by illusion. Now, Mahabharata version is a little different, but that's okay. Finally, it was decided, give them a little kingdom in a forest, Khandava forest. So they made a little kingdom, but it became a big kingdom because Yudhisthira was the ruler and so forth and so on. Lord Krishna was sent, this is text 9, Lord Krishna was sent by Arjuna into the assembly as the spiritual master of the whole world, and although his words were heard by some, like Bhishma, as pure nectar, it was not so for others who were completely bereft of the last farthing of their past pious works. The king, Dhritarashtra, or Duryodhana, that's in brackets, did not take the words of Lord Krishna very seriously. This is Krishna's peace mission. So question, when Krishna was, not just by Arjuna, here it says Arjuna, but it was everyone, particularly Yudhisthira, according to Mahabharata, but where were Krishna and the Pandavas making this plan to have a peace settlement? Where were they? They were in the kingdom of Virat. That's where Krishna went from, to Hastinapur. And from the purport, due to the exhaustion of the pious results of their past deeds, Duryodhana, or his father, Dhritarashtra, did not take the message very seriously. Not only he didn't take it very seriously, he was very insulting. Not only he was very insulting, but their plan was to capture Krishna and this way discourage the Pandavas, because their dear cousin Krishna, who was also the cousin of Duryodhana, would be defeated. Well, it didn't work out for Duryodhana very well. That is the way of persons who have no credit of pious deeds. By past pious deeds, one may become the king of a country. But because the results of the pious acts of Duryodhana and company were dwindling, it became evident from their actions that they were sure to lose the kingdom to the Pandavas. This is people who want the fruits of piety, so wealth, influence, Janma Aishvarya Shruta Shribir, in the words of Kunti. Those are the fruits of piety, but the fruits of piety go to those who are pious. But if they're impious, then the fruits of piety are the bank account, the punya account is dwindled. And when they were bankrupt of pious credits, they lost the kingdom. So people that want to have a kingdom, what to speak of maintain a kingdom, they should be pious. But what happens when people aren't pious, like in the age of Kali? And this was a big lamentation that Prabhupada would express again and again and again and again. He liked monarchy, but not the simple monarchy, but a monarch that's qualified. And how does one become a qualified monarch? Not just by birth, but by proper training by qualified brahmanas. So without qualified brahmanas and a qualified monarch, you have Kali Yuga. It's chaos and everybody suffers. Anyway, so you listen to Prabhupada's recorded lectures or read his books, and it's all over the place. Just this morning, at 5:30 this morning, I was with a group of devotees from China, and we were making a review of the first 15 chapters of Light of Bhagavad. And one of the statements in the Light of the Bhagavad is chapter 3, is a metaphor taken from Canto 10, chapter 20, the rainy season, and the autumn season that follows the rainy season. That's chapter 20. So Prabhupada was taking images from nature and helping his audience understand lessons that we can learn from nature. So the metaphor, poetic imagery, was during the summer season, the hot sun extracts water from the sea and from rivers and reservoirs of water, and it forms clouds, and it comes down in the form of rain in the rainy season. That's the image of the monsoon season in Vrindavan. Similarly, governments have the duty or the right to take taxes. Now, how are taxes to be utilized? And Prabhupada writes that the purpose of taxation, the purpose of a good government, both, is to build character. Primary purpose of a good government and a good country governed by the good government is the persons have good character. But it's based upon the prior understanding. The good king is a good king and thus a good government because they're trained by brahmanas, and the brahmanas are qualified because they know what scripture says, and they not only teach, but they instruct the kings. They don't want to rule. They want to guide and instruct the kings, who then rule according to the conclusions of scripture, which in essence is the citizen should have good character. That is, good character. What does good character rest upon? We discussed this yesterday evening. Good character rests upon bhakti, or Mayi Chananya Yogena Bhaktir Avyabhicharini. That's a phrase that comes from chapter 13, text 8 through 10. It's important, that's why I'm mentioning it again. There's qualities of a person of good character. How do you tell that does a person have good character or not? There's characteristics, and there's 19 listed. And all those 19 are resting upon one. And the one is this one. Undivided devotional service, Ananya Bhakti. And from Ananya Bhakti comes good character. So good government is dependent upon a good leader. And a good leader is dependent upon good instructions, and of course being submissive to good instructions. The problem here is Duryodhana wasn't submissive to good, nor was Dhritarashtra not submissive to good instruction. So they did bad things because they weren't submissive. They weren't of good character. And that's why Krishna wanted them removed. Krishna was going to be, reasonably shortly after the Kurukshetra battle, the plan from Krishna's side was he was going to leave. He had entered and he was going to leave this world. He wanted to leave the world behind, governed by a qualified king. And that was Yudhisthira. Now, by default, by usurping the authority, Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana was acting as the king under Dhritarashtra. So Krishna didn't want to leave the world, leaving Duryodhana in charge. He had to be removed. And he tried to do it peacefully. But not only it wasn't, accepted, he was insulting. Duryodhana was he had some piety, and thus he could be in the position, at least for some time, but bad things, impious, he was exhausting his pious credits. So for sure, he would lose the kingdom. Now, what do we have today? We don't have pious kings. We don't have Yudhisthira-type people. So we have chaos. We have people that aren't of good character electing somebody. What's the point? If a bunch of camels get together, who are they going to elect? A big camel. If you have dogs coming together, they're going to elect a big dog. You have ignorant people, they're going to elect a big ignorant person because they're charismatic and they have some piety, and thus they have some wealth, and thus in some influence, some fruits of pious credits. And then the people are dissatisfied, they want to pull them down. And they can't be satisfied. So what is the opportunity? What do we do about this? We're little people. What do we do about this? We do what Vyasadeva did, we do what our acharyas do, we do what our founder acharya did. We propagate Bhagavad Dharma. We receive it and we propagate it. Propagate it means we live the example. Prabhupada wanted many acharyas. And many acharyas doesn't mean, many Diksha gurus. It means many persons who are exemplary. They teach by example. That's what we're supposed to do. So how are we going to teach by example if we don't have good qualities? It's a challenge, isn't it? How do you get good qualities when you don't have good qualities? Maichananyu yogena bhakti ravya vicharini. In a very serious way, because we want to be servants of Krishna, and as servants of Krishna, we want to be instruments to give benefit to the world around us. At least those who are willing to accept it. And even those that aren't willing to accept it, there's benefit anyways. Just by the presence of acharya-like persons on the surface of the earth, the people on earth and the earth planet itself benefits. The earth planet itself benefits just by the presence of acharya-like persons. How's that? Mother Nature, prior to King Prithu, Mother Nature was restricting. And why was Mother Nature restricting? Because the king was not just impious, he was brutal. So she restricted her supply. Or during the time of Yudhisthira, the earth was supplying abundantly because there was a qualified person in the leadership role. So we're not leaders, we're not government heads of state. We're little people. That's okay. Good government, the sign of good government is people who have good character. And again, how do you get good character when you don't have it? Maichananyu yogena bhakti ravya vicharini. And so Bhagavad Dharma promotes bhakti to Bhagavan. Remember the verse that we discussed twice? Vasudeve Bhagavati bhakti yoga prayojataha janayati ashu vairagyam jnanam cha yadahaitakam. We discussed it twice. And same message here. So now we're in the third canto, taking that message. So Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga unto whom? Vasudeva. And when that happens, Bhakti awakens, and in Bhakti awakens good qualities. Knowledge awakens, and detachment awakens. Detachment from the coverings, the darkness. It's a science. It's a spiritual science. And you can experiment, as with any science. You can, here's the theory, and then you go to the laboratory of life, and you try the experiment, and you observe what happens, the observations and conclusions, right? 8th grade science. Hypothesis, experiment, observations, conclusions. It's a spiritual science. It works. There's some prerequisites. You actually follow the science. And the science requires something subtle, not just something gross. That's not only something that the body does, but something that the subtle body does. Man-mana, or madgatena antaratmana. Antar Atma, the soul within super soul, Antar Atma, and Madgatena, the mind is absorbed in the Supreme Soul while the body is doing. It's bhakti, Bhagavat bhakti. And then good quality. So poor Duryodhana, he was losing his pious credits. And as a result of his pious credits being lost, he was doing more abominable things. And the more abominable things were resulting in the kingdom was taken from him. Not only the kingdom was taken from him, his life. And when his life was taken, the good news is he got liberation from the so many sinful things by being killed in the presence of Krishna, Duryodhana. Prabhupada writes in this purport, that is the way of persons who have no credit of pious deeds. By past pious deeds, one may become the king of a country, but because the results of the pious acts of Duryodhana and company were dwindling, it became evident from their actions that they were sure to lose the kingdom to the Pandavas. The message of Godhead is always nectar to the devotees, but it is just the opposite to the 9 devotees. Sugar candy is always sweet to a healthy man, but it tastes very bitter to persons suffering from jaundice. And I have practical experience. Many years ago, I had jaundice. And I knew what it said, so I got asked for mystery. And boy, does it taste bitter. It's real. But, I kept taking it because that's the medicine. So the beginning of Bhagavad Bhakti may seem nice and may not seem nice. It's the medicine for the material disease. Bhagavad Bhakti. Text 10. When Vidura was invited by his elder brother Dhritarashtra for consultation, he entered the house and gave instructions which were exactly to the point. His advice is well known, and instructions by Vidura are approved by expert ministers of state. So Vidura, we discussed this. Who was Vidura before he was Vidura? Yamaraj. And that was discussed in the earlier first canto. So Yamaraj brought Manduka Muni to his court and gave him the punishment that he should be killed by falling on a changa, like strong spears that pierce his body. And Manduka Muni asked Yamaraj, why this sentence? Well, the answer was from Yamaraj, that when you were a child, Mandukya Muni, you pierced an ant with a sharp straw through his rectum, so you should die that way. And Mandukya Muni said, I was a child, so punishment, okay, but the punishment for a child and the punishment for, an adult doing such a thing are different. But so be it, I'll accept. But I curse you, you take birth as a Shudra. Poof. Vidura took birth as a Shudra. As the son of a Shudrani, he became a Shudra by birth, but not by quality. He is Yamaraj, the knower of Dharma, by quality. And his advice was the best. As Yamaraj was one of the 12 Mahajans, so Vidura was also seen by the qualified people as he's right. He's Yamaraj. He's a perfect knower of Dharma. When Vidura was counseling Dhritarashtra, there's a description in Mahabharata that one evening they spent the whole night. And Vidura was right to the point. He didn't get soft. He was very firm. And in the morning, Dhritarashtra's message, his reply, everything you said is right, but I can't follow it. Why you can't follow it? I'm too much attached. So when you're too much attached, you may receive good instruction. Even you may object to the instruction, or you may accept the instruction, which is special, because most people that are really covered with attachments and so forth, they say no. It's not right. They present another idea that matches their attachment. At least Dhritarashtra was honest enough to know, the instruction is right, but I can't follow it because I'm too much attached. Dhruva did the same thing. Instructions from his mother, instructions from Narada, and he couldn't do it because he was too much attached. But the good news is, Dhruva got the mercy of Narada, and the good news is, Dhritarashtra eventually got the mercy of Vidura, where he said yes instead of no. Much later. So the next verse, text 11. Vidura said, this is what Vidura's conversation with Dhritarashtra. Text 11. You must now return the legitimate share to Yudhisthira. I mean, they're due to, by law, they were to become the emperors of the world, following their father. But at least, the due share, like divide the kingdom. Yudhisthira, who has no enemies and who has been forbearing through untold sufferings due to your offenses. He is waiting with his younger brothers, among whom is the revengeful Bhima, breathing heavily like a snake. Surely you are afraid of him. Text 12. Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, has accepted the sons of Pritha as his own kinsmen. Now, Duryodhana was also, they're cousins. The Pandavas are cousins, and the Kauravas are cousins. In fact, it's said that it was Dhritarashtra's idea to make that distinction. They're actually all Kauravas, or sons of Kuru, an ancestor. But he made the distinction, we're the Kauravas, and they're the sons of Pandu. The us and them. That happens in material consciousness, us and them. It's material consciousness. Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, has accepted the sons of Pritha as his kinsmen, and all the kings of the world are with Lord Sri Krishna. He is present in his home with all his family members. The kings and princes of the Yadu dynasty who have conquered an unlimited number of rulers, and he is their Lord. Better watch out, Dhritarashtra. Purport. Vidura gave Dhritarashtra very good counsel regarding political alliance with the sons of Pritha, the Pandavas. The first thing he said was that Lord Krishna was intimately related with them as their cousin, the Pandavas. Because Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is worshipable by all brahmanas and demigods who are worshipable by everybody else, who are the controllers of the universal affairs. Besides that, Lord Krishna and his family members, the royal order of the Yadu dynasty, were the conquerors of all kings of the world. Paragraph. The Kshatriyas used to fight the kings of various dominions and kidnap their beautiful princess daughters after conquering their relatives. This system was laudable because the Kshatriyas and the princesses would be married only on the basis of chivalry of the conquering Kshatriyas. All the young princes of the Yadu dynasty married the daughters of other kings in this way by chivalrous force, and thus they were conquerors of all the kings of the world. The Yadu dynasty was big. You know, the numbers are really big. Just Krishna's wife, not to speak of everybody else in their families, 16,108 queens, each of whom had 10 sons and 1 daughter, each of whom had 10 sons. That's a big number, a lot of zeros after all that. And then everybody else, and they, you know, it's a big kingdom. And it's said by our acharyas that each of these persons were as powerful as Krishna. They were empowered. They were bearing the Lord's Shakti, like him. Very powerful. So, conquering kings in all directions, because the young man had married princesses attained in this method. All the young princes, Vidura wanted to impress upon his elder brother that fighting with the Pandavas was fraught with many dangers because they were supported by Lord Krishna, who had conquered, even in his childhood, demons like Kamsa. How old was Krishna when he killed Kamsa? 11 years. And Kamsa was so powerful that he had conquered many other kings. And when he conquered other kings, he gave them a choice, A or B. A, you become submissive to me and you assist me in my ruling. Or B, I'll kill you. What's your choice? So many of them agreed, and they were mystical, some of them were mystical people that had the ability to be shape-changing personalities, and they were the demons that Krishna killed. But they were subdued by Kamsa, an 11-year-old boy, one punch, and he not only knocked him to the ground, but he was dead. How powerful was Krishna? So Krishna has killed demons like Kamsa. Now, Jarasandha. Jarasandha was killed before the Kurukshetra battle. Jarasandha was killed before the Rajasuya Yajna, which happened before the Kurukshetra battle. So when he's speaking to Dhritarashtra, it's at that time, before the Kurukshetra battle. Krishna has killed these two. Jarasandha was so powerful. Now, Krishna defeated him 17 times, but he himself, Jarasandha, was very, very powerful. It's a long story. When it was considered who and how should Jarasandha be killed, you know the story? The story is, I think I narrated it. One day, at the Sudharma Assembly Hall in Dwarka, Krishna had come, entered the assembly hall, seated on a seat, and they were doing what they do in the assembly hall. The conversation was how to kill Jarasandha that morning. As they're having the conversation, a messenger arrived from kings, 20,000 kings that had been imprisoned by Jarasandha. The messenger was appealing, please release us, we're your devotees. Jarasandha is wicked. And I don't know how he became so powerful, because he's against you and we're your devotees and we're in jail. But somehow that happened. Please free us from this circumstance. Before Krishna even got a chance to reply to that messenger, Narada Muni came with a different message. The different message was, Yudhisthira is requesting your presence for a Rajasuya sacrifice and your blessings that it's successful. We discussed this, remember. The commentary says Narada Muni knew what Krishna wanted because he was so intimate with Krishna. He knew what Krishna wanted. And so what Krishna wanted was to kill Jarasandha. And to kill Jarasandha was necessary to perform the Rajasuya. So Yudhisthira was inspired to request Narada, not necessarily knowing that Krishna wanted to kill Jarasandha, and that day that he would arrive is when they were talking about killing Jarasandha. But Yudhisthira's desire for the Rajasuya was in keeping with Krishna's desire, because he's a pure devotee. His desires are in keeping with Krishna's desires. So we discussed this, remember. Krishna turned to Uddhava. What should we do? And Uddhava gave the advice that he knew Krishna wanted. It was really good advice. And everybody in the royal assembly, almost everybody, went, Haribol. Very good, very good. Sadhu, sadhu. Those that objected were the younger members of the Yadu dynasty, because they were Kshatriya-like and they wanted to have battle with Jarasandha and his army. But Krishna didn't want that. Krishna didn't want the Yadu army to go defeat Jarasandha's army for two reasons. They're both really good reasons. One of the reasons was, if there's a big battle, innocent people will be killed. That's not necessary. Innocent people should not be harmed. The second was, in the course of battle, enormous wealth is taken, and Krishna wanted that wealth to be given voluntarily, rather than through military combat, voluntarily given to the next king, who was Jarasandha's son. Krishna anointed him the son of the king. And then the son gave the wealth to Yudhisthira, which was needed for the Rajasuya Yajna. It's like a chess match with 10 steps ahead already figured out. And he's makes the arrangements for the chess game. Krishna's plan. So Uddhava gave a suggestion that was Krishna's idea, but he spoke it. So Uddhava got the credit for a really good plan, and that's the way it happened. So this is elaboration on, he killed demons like Kamsa and Jarasandha and demigods like Brahma and Indra. Now he didn't kill, but he defeated Brahma, the Brahma Vimohan Leela, and the Guru Govardhan Puja, he defeated Indra. Therefore, all universal power was behind the Pandavas. Don't mess with the Pandavas. Should I read one more verse? Yes, one more verse, and then we're going to discuss. Vidura to Dhritarashtra in a private chamber. You are maintaining offense personified, Duryodhana, as your infallible son. But he is envious of Lord Krishna. And because you are thus maintaining a non-devotee of Krishna, you are devoid of all auspicious qualities. Relieve yourself of this ill fortune as soon as possible and do good to the whole family, because their family, Vidura and Dhritarashtra, were brothers, born of different mothers, but of the same father. They're brothers. You could say stepbrothers. Purport, 2 paragraphs. A good son is called apatya, one who does not allow his father to fall down. The son can protect the father's soul when the father is dead by offering sacrifices to please the Supreme Lord Vishnu. This system is still prevalent in India. After the death of his father, a son goes to offer sacrifices at the lotus feet of Vishnu at Gaya, and thus delivers the father's soul if the father has fallen. But if the son is already an enemy of Vishnu, how in such an inimical mood can he offer sacrifice unto Lord Vishnu's lotus feet? Lord Krishna is directly the personality of Godhead Vishnu, and Duryodhana was inimical to him. He would therefore be unable to protect his father Dhritarashtra after his death. He himself was to fall down because of his faithlessness toward Vishnu. How then could he protect his father? Vidura advised Dhritarashtra to get rid of such an unworthy son as Duryodhana as soon as possible if he was at all anxious to see the good of his family. Now that's tough advice, but it's good advice. And he couldn't listen. I mean, he couldn't follow it because he was too attached to a bad person who happened to be his son. Final paragraph. According to the moral instructions of Chanakya Pandit, quote, what is the use of a son who is neither a learned man nor a devotee of the Lord, unquote. If a son is not a devotee of the Supreme Lord, he is just like blind eyes, a source of trouble. A physician may sometimes advise the extrication of such useless eyes from their sockets so that one can be relieved of the constant trouble. Duryodhana was exactly like blind, troubled eyes. He would be a source of great trouble, that's Duryodhana, to the family of Dhritarashtra, as foreseen by Vidura. Vidura, therefore, rightly advised his elder brother to get rid of this source of trouble. Dhritarashtra was wrongly maintaining such personified offense, Duryodhana, under the mistaken impression that Duryodhana was a good son, able to liberate his father. So there's all kinds of instructions here. Largely it's swadharma, and sometimes swadharma or one's prescribed duties are not easy, or they rub against you, but doesn't mean don't do them. Now, swadharma or paradharma can't be understood by somebody who's envious. It's like, that's just a mathematical formula. One becomes blinded by envy of the Supreme, or one can see when that envy of the Supreme is removed. So how to remove envy? It's, the medium or the method is bhakti and bhakti begins by hearing. Everyone, here we are, Prabhupada's words, everyone that has a material body is like a flag flapping in the wind, saying, I'm envious. We wouldn't get one if we didn't have it, so it's just a public flag. So it's not like pointing fingers, it's every one of us. And what to do? We have a body, it's an indication of some improper attitude towards the Supreme. Now what to do? Well, you take the medicine, you recognize it, you can feel regret or repentance, and then you do the needful. So you suppose you contract some disease. I know a couple of devotees that recently got COVID. Now what do you do? There are things you can do before you get COVID, but once you have it, what do? You suffer. And depending on the brand or the variety or the strain of COVID, then there may be medicines. Then you take the medicines. Not to say the medicine is lovely, but you take the medicine that can cure the disease. Or you don't know what the medicine is, and you just let it run its course. And nature, the bodies by God's arrangement, can cure themselves of most things. So that's an option. Just sit tight. Let your misdeeds, the rebelliousness towards Krishna, diminish. But it's not going to diminish on its own unless you do something. There's free will choices that are involved. And what's the right free will choice to do when you know you have this material disease? Like, attraction for enjoying objects of the senses separately from the source of those objects. What do you do when that little light goes on and that this is bringing me misery? You need knowledge. But more than knowledge, the fruit of that knowledge, the symptom that knowledge has reached its proper position is surrender to Krishna. Who knows the verse? Raise your hand if you know the verse where Krishna says what I just said. Starts with Bahunam. Bahunam Janmanam Ante, Gyanavan, one who possesses Gyan, Mam Prapajyate. After many, many births of pursuing cultivation of knowledge, which is the antidote for ignorance, is knowledge. Light is the antidote for darkness. Knowledge is the antidote for ignorance. When you're in ignorance, what happens? You do ignorant activities. You have ignorant desires upon which come, or from which come, ignorant activities, which brings suffering. So we don't like the suffering part. You need knowledge. What's the right thing to do, not the wrong thing to do, and you do the right things and avoid it. So the symptom that one has actually developed knowledge is one takes shelter of Krishna. Here's the verse again. Bahunam Janmanam Ante. Janmanam Ante. Bahunam Janmanam Ante. Gyanavan Ma Prapajyate. The one who becomes filled with knowledge, Mam Prapajyate, surrenders to Krishna. Krishna says such a soul is very rare. So that the fruit of knowledge, that's the antidote for ignorance, is you surrender to Krishna. So just surrender to Krishna. Prabhupada made things so simple. Supposing somebody says, touch your nose. And the very simple way to touch your nose is like this. But supposing somebody says, no. You can try another way. But the end result is touch your nose. So there's the difficult cultivation of knowledge, many, and you may not get there. Very rare to get there. But if you get there, it's the same thing as this one. So just do this one. And that's the antidote for material existence, surrendering to Krishna. So that's what Vidura is advising his brother. But it doesn't do it. Why doesn't he do it? Too attached. Why don't we do it? We're too attached. I mean, not in a bad sense, that we're attached to bad stuff or bad personalities, but we don't surrender because we're attached to, according to the modes of nature, something. Attachment is of the soul. Feeling attraction for something is nothing wrong. Where is that directed? You know, intelligence needs to direct that natural affinity for being attracted to something. And that when you're attracted to something, the material dimension of being attracted to something is there's an object out there and it represents enjoyment. I just have to get it and bring my senses to that object, and then happiness is going to be found. But there's no happiness out there. The happiness is within. And what's that happiness within? It's being connected to the Supreme. While here in Texas, I'm going to be visiting a few colleges. And that message that I just spoke is the message I'm going to be speaking to the college kids. You know, in a different way than this audience, but the same message. What's real happiness? Finding real happiness. Because everybody wants happiness. College kids want it, adults want it, people on their deathbed want it. Everybody wants it. So what is it? First you have to know what it is, and then the method of getting it. So there's the illusory kind, and there's the real kind. Vidura is giving advice to Dhritarashtra how to find real happiness, and he can't do it because he's attached to illusion. His affinity for matter is too strong. So, what about us? How strong is our affinity for matter? It's going to vary from person to person. Within one person, it's going to vary from time to time. More, sometimes, less, sometimes. So as the discussion yesterday evening, come to the stage of study. Remember you asked the question of anishtata? So that's where we are, the unsteady. It's like a Ferris wheel. We just keep going around and around like kids on a Ferris wheel, up and down. And that's life. We enjoy it sometimes when it's up, and when it's down, it's like you want to vomit off the side of the Ferris wheel. Not nice. We're not meant for that. Even on the path of bhakti, we're not meant for unsteady. We're meant to come minimally to steady, and becomes from steady. The movement further happens quickly, but to get to steady from unsteady, there's some work. Don't whine and complain, oh, I don't want work. I just want the thing dropped on my lap. Krishna, please give me prema bhakti with no requirements. It's not how it works. The heart's orientation needs to, when that bestowal is there, when that mercy is given, the heart's ready to receive it. And it's not like a sieve, it just doesn't go right through the strainer. It stays, because the vessel of the heart is made ready to receive it. That's Bhagavad Dharma. So let's see if there's some discussion. Bhagavatam is nice, isn't it?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you for a wonderful class. I have a question like the often confuses.
You better remove your mask because it's muffled a little bit. Well, that's just the last part.
So when I gone through some classes or reading Bhagavatam, so the happiness means the gap between two miseries. That is one. And the second one is given an example that earlier the punishment is dipping one person into the water and he is very, very like lost breath. If you keep one more second, then he will die. Then they will pick out. Again, he will take nice breath, again dip into it. So the gap between the two dippings is the happiness. So my question is that happiness is not exist in this material world, or between the like lack of miseryness is the happiness in the material world, or real happiness is there? Often I couldn't understand that.
Yes, you know the answer, but I'll say what you already know. You know the answer, but I'll say it because you're asking, but you'll go yes. Is there water in a mirage?
No.
It looks like.
Yes.
Is there water in a mirage?
No.
No. Similarly, is there happiness in a place where there's no happiness?
No.
So what is that experience in between two sufferings? What is it? It's the diminishing of the suffering is taken as happiness. That's not what happiness is.
Okay.
Happiness is something that's of the soul. What's that happiness that's of the soul? It's not of something out there. It's something in here. It's not bringing the senses to sense objects. And there's something there, it's called happiness, a little buzz that says, ah. But that's not what happiness is. That's a trick of Maya to keep us chasing after the mirage. There is no happiness there.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Then what's happiness? It's of the soul. And then you can elaborate on what real happiness is. But it's important. It's not absolutely essential, but it's important. Knowledge helps us, it helps nourish bhakti. Because without knowledge, the tendency is to keep doing dumb things. The root cause of suffering is ignorance. Buddhists have a different idea. The Buddhist idea is the root cause of suffering is desire. So just annihilate desire and you've annihilated suffering. But desire is of the soul, even in the healthy condition, even in the stage of perfection. There's desire in relation to the Supreme Lord. So desire isn't the problem, it's ignorance is the problem.
Ignorance.
So you just layer ignorance on top of a living entity and you get ignorant desire. So until ignorance is removed, we're not going to experience happiness. But here's the good news. Supposing you're not like really intelligent, you just like devotion. Well, the good news is, bhakti, that was this verse that we just cited twice. Bhakti causelessly awakens knowledge and detachment. Detachment from the source of misery. We don't like the misery, but we like the objects that bring the misery. And we have attachment, not to the suffering, but to the objects that the mind says there's happiness out there. We just have to adjust things and just keep trying like a donkey to find happiness where there's no happiness. So the answer to your question is there is real happiness, but it's defined differently. It actually is. It's the substance of happiness is of the soul. The soul is Satchit Ananda, so connect the soul with the Supreme Soul and you have happiness. Not just happiness, Ananda. And the reflection of that, like a mirage, there's no happiness in the reflection. That's 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Okay. Someone else?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So Maharaj, we were just sitting about Vidura advising Dhritarashtra, and then his advice was rejected. And eventually Vidura was insulted, and then he left. I was thinking, and there is a parallel of this incident in the Ramayana when Vibhishana was trying to advise Ravana,
Oh, yeah.
and he was insulted the same way, and then he has to live. So the question is, why do devotees or good people, they hang around or they stick around to advise other people that are like, just banging your head on the brick wall, something is not going anywhere, but they're still trying.
Why do we stay in the material world? Vidura stayed and Vibhishan stayed because they didn't see a brick wall. They saw, I'm a brother and I have affection for my brother. My brother is like heading in the bad direction. Let me try to help. And so again and again and again. And both of them at a certain point realized, there's no more service for me here. But the reason they stayed was service. So same, why do we stay? Why do you live in Austin? Why do you do what you do? If you're Krishna conscious, you're just like, what are you going to do? Go somewhere. Where are you going to go? Where are you going to go where it's the spiritual world is where there's no darkness. So what do? You try to make the place where you are the spiritual world. That's a challenge. But the method is by becoming sadhu-like. And where the sadhu is, that place becomes as good as Vaikuntha. So make your home Vaikuntha. And supposing not everybody in your family, including yourself, are Vaikuntha Vasis, then you go in that direction. That's what you do. That's why they stayed. Service. They had affection, but they were detached because they were exalted devotees. Having affection is natural. It's of the soul. But attachment is not of the soul. They were doing out of service. Then at some point, there's no more service here. So Vidura left not because he was insulted. It's a misunderstanding. Oh, you're going to insult me? I'm leaving. That's not Vidura. There's no more service for me here. I've tried and I've tried and I've tried again and I've tried again and I've tried again. No more service for me here. Now, what did Vidura do? Did he go to Dwarka or because at that time Krishna was with the Pandavas nearby with King Virat's kingdom. He could have just gone to King Virat's kingdom and just hung out with Krishna. He didn't. Because he felt, I've been contaminated, this is humility, by this bad association. So he went to purify himself. In the case of Vibhishan, he went straight to Ram. He didn't go to pilgrimage places. He went straight to Ram and took shelter. So we should see examples of such elevated persons and learn from their example, understand what they're teaching us, and then to our capacity, we practice.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Anything else?
Online question, Guru Maharaj. What kind of piety Duryodhana did to get liberated in front of Krishna?
Well, all of the demoniac kings got liberated by being in the presence of Krishna. So it's more Krishna's mercy than the piety of the demoniac kings. Now, to become a king, there has to be some piety. The question is, what piety did they do? I think a better question is, what piety did they do to become a king? We don't have that information. Whatever they followed, to some degree, they followed Vedic culture. To whatever degree they followed Vedic culture, they were accumulating piety. But behind that doing piety was diabolical purposes. It's called duskriti. Kriti means merit, and duskriti means you use the fruit of that merit for bad stuff. So they had some merit being misused. But being liberated by Krishna had nothing to do with piety or impiety. It had to do with Krishna's mercy. Anything else? Srila Prabhupada ki? Jai.